Good morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to listen to this iteration of Quickfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with the goal, and I am joined by my lovely jubbly co-hosts, DJ,
Anna,
and Tim.
Hey, it's fun to be doing these, isn't it?
Yes, I feel like we've done so many Quickfires, especially this season, but I mean, there's just been a lot happening around the club. Exciting news, because we, for the longest time, have been talking about who is going to come in for Frank Klopas, because we knew that Frank Klopas wasn't going to stay for too long as head coach. Who is it? Why? It's Gregg Berhalter, former USMNT head coach, who was dismissed after the United States' disappointing run at Copa America. So he hasn't had a job since last summer, and lo and behold,
I mean,
this
really,
summer,
like that's the summer that has recently passed.
The summer that has recently passed. There we go.
But yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll say it like that. Yeah, so Berhalter's in, and not only is he in as head coach, but he is here as, what is the full title? Director of football. Like, he is basically taking over the entire Fire organization, including the first team, Fire 2, and the academy, along with head coach.
The sporting side of
the sporting side, yes.
So it's not the same position that like Garth Lagerwey has in Atlanta, where he's the team president overseeing both the sporting and commercial sides. He's exclusively overseeing the sporting side, but he's overseeing all of the sporting side.
All of it.
From the first coach, from the first team, and being the head coach of the first team, on down through the academy and the Fire 2.
Yes, and he was going to report just directly to Mansueto himself. So, but there hasn't been any status announcement, sort of what Pelter's doing, that hasn't been announced publicly yet. And Klopas, he will transition to vice president of football. So he's going to be essentially a right-hand man to Gregg Berhalter. So we basically knew that Klopas was going to stay with the club. There was no doubt about that.
Yeah, he was dropping some hints in recent press conferences about it. I don't think that anyone should really be that surprised that, you know, he was calling it the biggest off-season in Fire history for the past few weeks. He said that to us in press conferences. He kind of got the impression that that was because he wasn't going to be in charge, even though there was no official statement about that until today.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, we said this before, the entire season, it just seemed like Klopas did not want to even be here.
He also hinted at that too. He said that he didn't want to coach anywhere else, that he was basically doing this because he would do anything for the team. And I think that you can read between the lines on that however you will. I think that it isn't really a job that he necessarily wanted to find himself in at this point in his career.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us knew, or some people knew from the start of the season, that our season wasn't going to be the greatest as with Frank Klopas at the helm. And I think I don't know if he knew it or anything, but he gave his best, but it just, I guess, wasn't enough. So at least he's still at the club, so that's good, and he's not going anywhere, because no matter what his managerial record is, he is still a club legend, or probably one of the biggest club legends, as we are recording this on the club's 27th birthday. So happy birthday, yes. Chicago Fire.
Yes, 27 very, very long years.
The team is really just like entering its prime. This is exactly when you want to sign the team on like a big deal. Just, you know.
Yes, thank you, Tim. So, as mentioned, Gregg Berhalter, he was the former United States men's national team head coach. He was there on 2 stints, one from 2018 to 2020. Then he left after some controversy. He came back for the 2023 through 24. And then, as mentioned, because of how just disappointing the run at Copa America has been, he was given the boot from there. During his time with the Crew, because previously to managing the USMNT, he managed the Columbus Crew. He saw them qualify for the postseason 4 out of 5 times that he was there, and he got the Crew all the way to the MLS Cup final in 2015. So he definitely has MLS experience.
Where he only lost because of a really bad own goal moment. Or no, was it an own goal? It was basically a really bad misplay, wasn't it?
Yeah. Are you talking about the Diego Valeri goal in the first minute? Yep. Yeah.
The one where it was just such a disaster. The crew got off to a really bad start.
Yeah, and they still, Kai Kamara got one back in the 18th minute, so, Rodney Wallace, I believe, scored before Kai Kamara, so it was 2-0 before the 8th minute started. Kind of hard to come back from that in the Cup final, but, I mean, look, this was a Anthony Precourt era crew team. Sneaking suspicion that a lot of people have had, and I can't say that it's the craziest idea that I've heard in the world, is that when Precourt bought the team, he bought it as a way of saving on expansion fees because it was cheaper to buy the crew than to pay for an expansion team, and had plans to move them to Austin all along, which meant that that's harder to do if the crew aren't doing really well. He did not have a big budget available to Gregg Berhalter. And despite that, Berhalter, who was both the sporting director as well as the head coach while in Columbus, teams that, again, consistently made the playoffs, made MLS Cup one time, and they were fun to watch, too.
Yeah. Speaking of, that double sort of role, that dual role, Joe Mansueto himself said that Gregg Berhalter's previous success in MLS, where he thrived in a dual role, and his experience leading the U.S. men's national team over the last 6 years, makes him an ideal fit for our vision and the club moving forward. The club has sort of labeled this as the path to tomorrow starts today. That's what they were calling it, the path of tomorrow.
Which is one of the most cringeworthy social media campaigns that we've seen for a while. It's not be proud, not loud level, but we're nearing that memeability.
Yeah,
that,
but still.
Yeah.
And then Greg himself had to say, Chicago is an incredible city built on communities of hardworking and passionate people who truly love soccer. I look forward to working alongside our staff and players to transform the Fire into a world-class organization that all our fans and the city can be proud of and will support. Strong words, Mr. Berhalter.
Yes.
Let's see if that can happen. So
he has
speaking
his
of that,
work cut out of him.
amen, I say to that. So, I mean, first of all, overall thoughts and hopes for a sort of reactions. Did we jump for joy? Were we all right, this is neat, or are we sort of still a bit on the fence?
I think you can't argue with the fact that the Fire are a better team today than they were yesterday going forward. I mean, and I think that that's really what you need. Now, it's not, I think, ideal in some ways, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, that he's both the head coach and sporting director, because that is a lot of work, and sometimes those jobs are perfectly aligned, and sometimes they're kind of at cross purposes, and you don't really want to be at cross purposes when when those things are happening, or sometimes they have to be at cross purposes, right? The coach is trying to win now. It's the sporting director's job to try to make sure that the team does well in the long run. And those things are sometimes the same thing, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes you get situations where a sporting director will make signings that don't fit a certain coach because they believe they're the right decision in the long run. And that doesn't happen as much when a head coach / sporting director thinks, if I don't make signings that help us win X by Y time, my job is in the line. Now, having said that, in this case, one, I think that it's clearly a step forward, and someone that has a lot more MLS experience than anyone at the top of the front office did. There were people in the Fire organization that did have a lot of MLS experience the whole time, but they weren't in those leadership positions. And I think that that's a huge step. I think the other thing is that giving someone the ability to sort of create things the way that they think they should be is one way to get a team out of a rut. And I think that it's hard to argue with the team now having the second longest playoff drought in league history and the longest of any team that didn't start with an expansion year, that the team is in a rut.
One of them, it's a rather large rut, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting Berhalter, the one really good thing about Berhalter is he brings in context. That is one of the big things where it's he knows the people, he knows agents, he knows players, he knows front offices already. Maybe not every front office in the world, but he has ways of talking to people. And
so when you think about what he was doing as USMNT head coach, he interacted with the sporting side of all of the organizations and the coaches that were there at the time for basically every player in the pool, including the ones that were not called up. And when you think about where some of the USMNT players were at different points of his tenure, I mean, we're talking about teams like Chelsea, I mean, Man City, like, we're talking about some very big names in global football. And then we're also talking about a lot of, you know, other names like PSV. We're talking, like, we're up and down the chain, you know, and a lot of teams that I think have a lot of players in their system that they think may not play for them, but could be good in MLS. I mean, would it be crazy for there to be someone somewhere in Dortmund's system that could kill an MLS, but that Dortmund don't have immediate plans to play, and so they can't develop the way that Dortmund, like, famously develops players? Like, that's a realistic possibility now, as is the fact that a lot of USMNT players right now have unstable club situations. And the Mauricio Pochettino has said he wants players having minutes, and he would rather have players he would pick MLS players over players that were in Europe and not playing for their teams. If you are, say, like a Weston McKennie, who isn't really in Juventus' plans, that sounds like shots fired if he wants to keep on being a contributor for the USMNT. Now, is he going to give up a ton of money to do that? No. Are the Fire a team that has open DP slots and an owner that has been shown a willingness to spend a lot of money?
Yes. Which is sort of what I was going to transition towards. DJ, you mentioned it greatly, that he has connections to a lot of the sporting world, and, you know, he has full control of the system that he wants to put in place for next season. He's got an entire off season and then some to do that. But that, you know, in order to bring players in, you got to move players out. And currently 12 players are on options or out of contract for next year, you know. And as we mentioned, Weston McKennie, he's been getting a lot of hype. And even Matt Doyle, someone we keep bringing up, he said he would not be surprised if the Fire made a Juve an offer they could not refuse for Wes. And as you mentioned,
that is such an Italian reference too. That has layers.
I know, it's perfect. So that was a great tweet from Matt Doyle. Make him an offer. Make him an offer. You can't refuse.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Juventus actually has mob ties too.
They're Italian.
I'm saying it's got layers.
Yeah.
And I think that you mean that they allegedly may have some mob ties.
Yes, please. Italian mob, don't off us, please.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, my grandpa's in the Irish Mafia. Don't worry.
All right. So yeah. But yeah. We sort of did this on the 100th episode, which, speaking of, if you haven't listened to it, you should go check that out, because a lot of the gang were there and we talked a lot about especially players that we want to see in and a lot of players we want to see out. And if you were there, thank you for being there and being a part of the audience participation section of that. So, I guess potential player moves. Who do we see being in, or who do we see being out under Berhalter?
I fully expect Berhalter. It's been said, I know Tyrus has said this, but it would not shock me if when we start the season, there's a lot of players that are not. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how to feel about that, depending on how many players are left go and who the players are. Because consistency in players is a good thing sometimes. Like, especially keeping guys like that aren't going to be world beaters. Like, C.J. Brown stuck around for 13 seasons with the Fire. He was not ever going to be a European star, but he was a really good serviceable center back. And he lasted to, what, I think 5 coaches, I want to say? So, I mean, guys like that.
But I think
yeah.
That was also a different era of MLS, and it was a different. It was a time when the league was significantly less connected to global football in general. You know, CJ was also there for a lot of winning teams, and I think that there's no one on the Fire roster that has won with the Fire because the team hasn't won, which means the culture needs to change. You know, I don't think that that's on individual players necessarily. Like, it's not, you know, Mauricio Pineda's fault that the team haven't made the playoffs, right? Like, But MLS rosters are limited in size. MLS is a salary cap league. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of players are on deals that are not cap friendly for the production they've been giving you, which means I think that you have to be willing to just move players on because that's what you need to do to free up the space you need on the roster. I would say that there's a very small core of players that I can't really see leaving in the immediate future. Chris Brady, Brian Gutierrez are probably at near the top of the list. Kellen Acosta's on that list. And even then, I think like Chris Brady, like if Chelsea was like, hey, we wanted to complete the set of your homegrown goalkeepers. We hear they're limited collector's items, and we need a starting 11 of MLS goalkeepers, and we only have 4. So, I mean,
Chelsea is that one guy that collects a lot of Funko Pops.
Oh boy, yeah. So if the team needed,
it's a good thing Alex isn't here.
Nah.
If the team needed another, if the team was offered $10 million for Chris Brady and he wanted to move, they wouldn't say no. I don't really think that that's going to happen. Same thing with Brian Gutierrez. Kellen Acosta is someone that Berhalter knows. They've worked together, and Alex Calabrese is working on a story right now to try to talk to Kellen about just what he expects from Gregg, essentially, now that he's in place. Hugo Kuipers is probably one of the guys that I would say he was a very good player, I think, for the service that he got and things like that, and it just is hard to move on from every DP. I don't think that, Berhalter would want to move on from him, And I think most other people on the roster, I don't think there's anyone that is not potentially movable, just because, again, you need flexibility, you need cap space.
True.
Some of it comes down to just, are players willing to renegotiate their deals? Is there a move that can be made? Or are you saddled with someone that is sort of like underproducing their contract, but you can't find them a way for them to move on?
It is worth noting that I think another 10 players are either out of contract or on options for 2026.
So there's a lot of players, honestly.
I think there's only 7 players, I want to say, 7 or 8, that are actually under contract for long term.
Yes, there's options on some more of them, right? So, but in terms of players the Fire are committed to, there's not a lot. So I think that 2025 is going to be a transition year. I think that you're going to see Berhalter try to move a number of players on as quickly as possible. I hate to call out a player because, again, it's not their fault that they're making what they're making. If you're a player, you should take every dollar that you can get a team to pay you because your careers are short and uncertain. But Gaston Jimenez, I think, is significantly overpaid for what he's been giving the Fire. He is under contract through 2025. If the Fire can find a way to get him on just to free up that cap space, not because they don't like him, I think that they do it. Federico Navarro is on a U22 deal, which is cap friendly, but that's also a prized spot on the roster. And he's not really producing for the Fire. Maybe they take a look at him, and maybe they try to move him on. I would be surprised if he was here anything close to through the end of his deal, which is 2027 with an option for 2028. I think that was the plan when he was signed to that deal, but I think the plan was to sell him for a lot of money. I don't think that's really on the table at the moment. Rafa Chihos' contract is expiring this year. He said he wants to stay, and he's kind of made it clear to the front office what he expects in terms of his salary. He is making absolute top center back in MLS money this year, and he's giving not top center back in MLS money performance. So
I think he's only a couple $100,000 beneath Zimmerman, I want to say, who is one of the few DP center backs in the league.
And, he may be willing to take a pay cut to stick around because I think that he realizes he's on the sort of one side of the hill for his career. But how much of a pay cut, and would that be worth it? And to some extent, even if it is a significant pay cut, the question becomes, can Berhalter find someone that he likes more for the same money or less? And so I think it could be a very different roster next year.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else, I guess, to mention about Gregory Berhalter and him coming into the Fire?
Just that... Go ahead. Sorry, DJ, you go
Tim,
first.
go ahead. Tim, go ahead.
We are going to get a press conference with Berhalter. It looks like it's slated to be on Thursday. So we will find out more then about his plans, about where he hopes to be, what I guess the next steps are, from his perspective, why he took the job and all of that, and we will have complete coverage of that on minutebread97.com as well as on socials. And we'll, follow up in the next pod, too, with a lot of it, I'm sure.
Yes. So, a lot of exciting things. A lot of exciting things are happening, so everyone should be excited, hopefully.
It is worth noting. Oh.
Yes. Now, please.
Berhalter is the fourth bald head coach in Fire history. The first two were pretty good. This third one was... Hopefully he's better. Well, I mean, Dennis Hamlin wasn't exactly great for players, but...
Why did you bring us on... We're ending us on a down note, man. I didn't say that Frank Yallop was the last time that the Fire had a combination sporting director or chief football officer or director of football and head coach. And now you come in with Dennis Hamlin references? Come on, man.
To make it even worse, Frank Yallop is the only other head coach in Fire history to have previous MLS knowledge.
Well, this has been fantastic. No, I mean, honestly, like, I know that Berhalter in some ways is a controversial choice because for the USMNT didn't win the World Cup. Like, I'm not really sure what the realistic expectation was there.
The U.S. men's national team.
He rebuilt that program basically from scratch after Cuba, right? And I think that that's the important thing, and that's something the Fire have needed. He had a locker room that was, in a lot of ways, broken, that he inherited, and he made it into a locker room that worked. It didn't work perfectly, but it was a lot better than it was before. I don't think that with a couple of games here and there, I don't think it's easy to argue that the USMNT underperformed under Berhalter.
I will also say this. With Berhalter, I hope this is not yet another 2 or 3 year thing where the coach just is here for a couple seasons and then gets fired. Because the Fire need a consistent coach. Even if it's not Berhalter, it's somebody that trained under Berhalter that can step in when Berhalter leaves, be it whoever. Personally, I hope it's Patrick Nyarko or Gonzalo Segares, but that's my own opinion.
And that's one thing with the combination head coach sporting director role. It opens the possibility that you can transition into just one part of that role after being done with the other, if things are going well. The other side of it is, like we kind of saw on the U.S. men's national team side, I think, that there can be a situation of overstaying your welcome. And, like, sometimes it's not about the person, it just is about fresh blood and a fresh message that can resonate with players and change things. But you need a good core for that to happen, and the Fire have not shown that they've had a good core in a very long time, and I think that this could potentially be the thing that changes it. I think there's a very good chance of that.
This is hopefully what the Fire need, at least from the top part. Now it's just up to them to get the players in.
Amen, I said to that. Alright. Oh, a short episode, but a good one, just to let you guys know what we are thinking about Gregg Berhalter coming in, not just as head coach, but as director of football. Things are going to change. This is probably going to be as big as a rebuild as we saw in like 2019, 2020. A lot of people coming in and out the door, probably. So,
yep,
exciting, isn't it? Here we go again, to say for the how manyth time, I guess. So
for the 5,766th time.
That many times in 27 years. Happy birthday, Chicago Fire Football Club.
Happy birthday, Miss O'Leary's cow.
That is an anti-Irish myth. All right. Let's just
I am Irish. Guys. What are you talking about?
You can still be self-loathing Irish.
All right.
Irish.
I, as always, have been Alan the Pole with the Gold, joined by Tim and DJ. Berhalter is going to be saying this, hopefully, along with us. Come on, you men in red.
Let's go Fire.
Vamos.